You are listening to The Big Scuba. This is an audio-only episode.
Hello, welcome to The Big Scuba Show.
So here we are, once again.
Hi, my name's Ian Campbell from Project Aware. I'm on the Big Scuba podcast with Gemma and Ian.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Big Scuba Podcast. Welcome back. This is episode 42, Gemma.
Yep.
And as we always like to start off with a few interesting facts. Got one for you, Gemma. Here we go. So, did you know episode 42 is, there ain't too many facts about 42, so this is the best I could find. Have you ever read the Hitchhiker's Guide? Don't look. Have you ever read the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
I haven't read it, no.
Have you seen the film?
I've seen things on TV.
Right. Okay. Well, for those who have, you'll know that 42 is the answer to life and everything. So the question of life, the universe, and everything is 42. So
Right.
There we go. That's the end of the podcast, and good night.
No, come on. We've got lots to talk about.
Right. Okay. So coming up on this episode of 42 at the Big Scuba Podcast, we've got Project Aware, Jen.
We have Ian Campbell.
We have, yeah, Norwich guy.
Yeah, local to us.
Yeah,
That's the most
he's-
local guest we've ever had.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. So on the east coast of England, there we go. And that's where he's based. And from there, he looks after the whole part of Project Aware
Worldwide.
worldwide. Yeah. So he's got a lot to do, keeps him busy, and he's always tweeting and going out
He's very
and
active,
sharing.
yeah.
So that's really good.
Hello, welcome to the Big Scuba YouTube channel. Thank you for watching this episode. If you'd like to see more, please do subscribe to our channel so you can hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the bell, that is the notification bell, and that will tell you when we release new episodes on the YouTube channel. So please do like, hit the thumbs up, and do comment because we love hearing your comments. So that's it, and carry on watching this episode.
And we've done Project Aware because with our last episode was with Cape Rad. If you haven't listened to Cape Rad yet, look them up. But they refer to Project Aware as well. So, and they're quite closely linked. So it's a really good episode to follow on from Cape Rad. All right. Jen, is there anything else?
No, I think we'll get straight in and listen to Ian Campbell from Project Aware on
There we go.
episode 42.
Awesome. Right, let's go.
How are you?
Yeah, really well.
Yeah,
Yes,
well, thank you
yeah.
very much.
Thank you for joining us.
No problem.
So, Ian Campbell from Project Aware, thank you for joining us on the Big Scuba Podcast today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. So first of all, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and your involvement in Project Aware, or how you got to be involved in Project Aware?
Certainly, yes. So I am the Associate Director of Policy and Campaigns in Project Aware. For those of you that don't know who Project Aware is, it was the conservation program that was started out by Paddy nearly 30 years ago. And it started off as a kind of branch of Paddy, and very quickly became very big. Obviously, a lot of divers very keen and interested and invested in conservation. So it became its own NGO, its own charity, very soon after being developed. And I joined in 2018 to run the kind of the policy in the conservation programs there. Previously I've had quite a varied career in marine conservation and fisheries, and pretty much spent my time in the oceans in one form or another. So yeah, and it was a great opportunity to join Project Aware. So some great programs going on all over the world, and I've now found myself back in the UK, ensconced in marine debris and shark and ray work.
So do you look after just the east of England, or do you look after the whole UK? Or
The global program. So Project Aware, I'd worked before I joined Project Aware, I'd worked with Project Aware extensively when I was at WWF and with other organisations. And Project Aware has projects all over the world,
Yeah.
and it's a global reach. And I was surprised at how smaller team Project Aware actually is. It's only 10 people.
Wow.
So we coordinate the work all over the world. We have an office in, we have offices in the PADI offices. So we kind of still have strong links to the PADI system. So we have an office in Sydney, we have an office in Bristol, and we have an office in the US. So the kind of global scope and global outreach. And I oversee all the global work, the global conservation and policy work.
Yeah.
So yes, not confined to any one particular geographic location.
Do you find that there's times of the year more busier than others globally, or is it just a really busy job? And
It's a constant. There's because we work on quite a wide variety of issues. The two main ones that we focus on is marine debris, and we work on shark and ray conservation, and those don't have seasons or cycles. And if they do in one country, they kind of taken up by another country. So it's pretty much a full-time, maybe a double full-time job all year round.
right.
Yeah.
And then, because you've also got other partners, like with our mutual partners, like with Reef World.
Yep.
Well, yeah. So how does that relationship work? Because they're quite a small band as well, aren't
yeah. So what so how Project Aware works from a conservation perspective is we say work on a huge global scale.
Yeah.
But we work with local partners all around the world on specific issues in their regions, on their specific reefs in their waters. And what we try to do is to provide assistance, provide sort of strategic oversight, policy guidance as to local partners, and this is all over the world, to get involved in conservation efforts in their region, but also link it up globally. So while we're much more of a kind of facilitator and a convener organization to small local partners around the world.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
So outside of COVID times, did you actually get to travel globally as well, or is it more coordination?
Yes. With what we try to, my role really is to try and take all the local efforts that have been done all over the world, and to get these efforts in front of the political decision makers to show that there's concern by a huge component of countries' economies, which is the tourism and dive economy, tackling huge major issues on marine conservation. So I did have a lot of travel pre times when there were planes, which we've obviously tried to minimize as much as possible. And what we have found with one of the things out of COVID is that lots of government meetings that had, you had to travel to them, and if you weren't traveling them and you weren't in the room, you didn't get a voice. They're finding out that actually these things can be done a lot more virtually. So one of the small blessings that's coming out of coronavirus is that political decisions still have to be made, but with the enforced restrictions of travel, it's kind of making the governments think about how can they include civil society.
Quite an interesting point. What's your thoughts on that then? Because once hopefully, at some stage we can start exploring the globe again, do you think with the view of Project Aware and being green and watching carbon footprint and all that, do you think there's a organisation you'll continue have more meetings via Zoom and these type of things, or do you think you'll go back to actually having physical meetings as a where you've got to get on planes and that?
It all depends on the objective of what we're working to. And so even pre-COVID times, we took great care to minimize the carbon footprint that we had on travel. Sometimes it was inevitable, but sometimes it's just kind of part of the normal way of thinking. But now we've got a new normal way of thinking. Moving forward, we want to minimize, especially internally. We're minimizing traveling internally for global meetings and even regional meetings. Sometimes in large-scale policy meetings, a bit like the one in, I think it's still going ahead in Glasgow with the climate change meeting of governments. Sometimes for huge things like that, if you're not in the room, you're kind of very easy to be ignored. And what I found with virtual meetings is you're given a slot to talk about issues that that your organization represents, be you a government or an NGO like we are. And once your talking slot ends, that's almost the end of the engagement. Whereas in the in-person meetings, you really have a chance to discuss and drill down finer issues with governments. And one of the issues that we've worked on is shark conservation. And without the kind of really taking governments on a journey of conservation journey, which you need to kind of have beyond that face-to-face, that initial virtual setup. You're not necessarily meeting objectives, but certainly it's provided an opportunity for the whole global network to realize, hang on a second, a lot of things can be done that don't necessarily need this huge impact.
It's quite interesting though, isn't it? That the fact that you've to be part of the decision making, you've actually got to get on a flight to actually be in the room, to be counted, where really the governments should actually be saying the opposite. It's
doubly hard for a.
Well, I understand.
Not hard. It's a position from our perspective, from an NGO. So the people that we represent are civil society. It's members of the public, and you have these large government meetings. Let's take fisheries, for example. So you have fisheries meetings happening all around the world. Now, there's a couple happening virtually at the moment, but generally they happen a couple of times a year, and all the governments that fish a certain stock or a certain species meet all around the world, and all the fishing industry, they travel out all around the world, and they get a big say and a huge sway in decisions that are made. And for an NGO representing civil society, and we're not the only one, there's a few, as Greenpeace, WWF, so Shark Trust in the UK, we're representing the public, and we are trying to hold public servants to account, and they're managing a public resource like fish, and they're using public money to do it. It's a difficult position to say we need to be in there to represent the public. Otherwise, decisions are made without any questioning, without any scrutiny, without any oversight. So, if meetings continue in a to be had in face-to-face meeting, we would need to be there just to represent our kind of constituents. And it's better to have one person or one organization or a few organizations representing millions of people than having thousands of people. But it's the problem. You've got that the fishing industry, or it could be the oil industry. They have people in the face-to-face, so it's in their interest to have face-to-face meeting.
Well, let's dial back a bit. Let's talk about you and your diving and your own diving experience, because I believe you spent time as a commercial diver.
That's right. Yeah, my diving started back. I won't tell you the exact year. I'll tell you how old I am. But yeah, I sort of brought up by the sea, and I'd never really dived. Did a bit of I call it surfing. It was in the UK, so you got like inch-high waves in the UK. But spent my time around the sea, and when I went to university, I studied marine biology. And one of the things that attracted me was not only the sort of Jacques Cousteau programs and Jaws. Now I'm giving away how old I am. Being in films.
As old as Gemma, then.
But it also the degree also came with a commercial scuba certificate, because you did some scientific scuba diving. So that I went up to Edinburgh and learned to dive in the Orkney Islands in March.
Nice.
Definitely. That was definitely dry suit diving.
Tasty.
So I that's where I learned to dive. I hadn't done any BiG or any recreational scuba diving up until that point. Then when I left university, I kind of traveled around the world a little bit, doing a little bit of work in, young guy going abroad. I sold down pretty much everything that wasn't nailed down in my possessions. Used that. I went to the Bahamas for a while to study sharks, and to Greece to study I was kind of helping out other people studying sea turtles. And it was a great life for a young guy. Until the bank manager kind of taps you on the shoulder and said, you kind of need to, the money's going one way. You need to have some money coming the other way. So this would have been 97, I think, sometime around that time, I decided to upgrade my commercial scuba to the commercial HSE Part 1, the offshore commercial certificate. So I was a commercial diver for 7 years. I did everything from underwater labouring. I've cleaned nuclear submarines in a Royal Navy base. I've welded badly anodes onto onto dock walls, offshore. I did some offshore work in the Middle East and
Deep stuff?
no, none of it's deep. None of it is deep. It's all basically work that a labourer would do but can't get to because it's underwater. So the deepest that you tend to go is about the deepest you can go is 50 meters. Deepest you would go would be 30 meters. Your average is 5 to 10 meters.
Yeah.
So it was great. I mean, it was a great job because it was one of those jobs that was great and horrendous in equal measures, in that you're self-employed, so once the job ends you're going, oh, where's the next job coming from? And it was, but the good things, it changed every single job. You could have a job for a day where you're putting in a tide gauge in a canal, right through to kind of laying new foundations for a ferry terminal. So it was really, really interesting. And what happened towards the end of my, so it's very as a single man's, live in a suitcase kind of a job. So you literally had to wait by the phone for a call. I guess self-employed, and if you turn a job down, you know that someone else is going to get that job, and then they're going to be in the organization. So it was pretty much living on the phone, waiting for the jobs to come in. And I found myself, because I was a marine biologist by training, I found myself being used more and more to do ecological surveys. So, for example, they would be doing building a new ferry port. They'd need to do an environmental survey, so they'd get the commercial diver, and he kind of knows what he's talking about, so go and do it. And I realized that there was I was being kind of, maybe like exploited is the wrong word, but sort of skill set was being used that I wasn't necessarily advancing. So I went back to university and did my master's, and then kind of moved into the conservation side from there.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's it's an interesting way to kind of get to where you are now. Yeah, and one of the things that always made me laugh was up until before I came to join Project Aware, I worked for WWF, the World Wildlife Fund for Nature. I was based in Fiji, working on the shark and ray, their global shark and ray conservation work. And when I finished my commercial dive career, which had been 7-8 years or so, I did say to anyone, look, if anyone sees me near any dive kit again, please shoot me. I never want to see a dive kit ever again. And then I got a job in Fiji, and I was like, well, maybe I was a little bit harsh there. So diving in Fiji was a bit different than diving in a canal in Liverpool, but yeah. Do you log your dive still? Yeah, no. I kind of, after the first, because when you commercial diving, you can be doing 3 or 4 dives a day, or you could be doing one dive for like maybe 3 or 4 hours, or you could be doing 20-minute dips, and all depends what you're doing. And then there was so much paperwork anyway, just to keep a log of your dives would have been that extra piece of paperwork where you just want to go to bed and fall asleep. So no, I don't think I've logged a dive for quite a while. Yeah.
We spoke to some people, and they kind of stop, and then have gone back to it, haven't they?
Yeah, and then they regret not logging.
I wish I had kept it. So I've got maybe the first, I'd say, 12 months of my commercial career, I've got my logbooks filled out. And I wish I'd kept them, because then I could go back and have most of my memories starting to go now. But I still have that, that buyer's remorse, that I wish I'd kept up with that.
When did you last dive for like a pleasure dive?
When did I last pleasure dive? I think that would have been.
Did you dive in the UK?
Not after living in Fiji. Not after extensively diving the UK in dry suit diving, then diving in Fiji, which was all either just in your shorts or your short sleeve wets. Yeah, coming back to the thought of, I've had so many dry suit zips burst commercially diving, and absolutely soaking wet, and you get out, it's even wetter above the water than it is under the water. And I've gone the South Pacific made me very soft when it comes to temperature. But yeah, the last dive I've done, I would say, I think it was last year in California. It was kind of work and kind of pleasure, where we did, so we have a program called Dive Against Debris. So Project Aware have this big global program where we try to get divers to go out and pick up marine debris. So we log that, and we use that information to assess the undersea environment. And I did a nice dive against debris. It was a little bit choppy, and the water was not a huge great viz, but it was just off California. I think it was last year. So.
Yeah. Well, the way things are, you might want to jump into the UK waters.
I tell you, if you'd have, if somebody told me at the beginning of the year that you're not going to dive,
And I was saying, well, that's okay, you won't dive. But if you told me if you're not going to dive and you're not going to, that's out of your hands. The minute it's out of your hands, you go, well, I actually want to dive. And for me, the diving in the UK is beautiful. You know, I've done some really great dives I've not necessarily appreciated because I've been doing work dives. It's just for me that the temperature thing now is I'm too old to.
Winter time, that can be.
Yeah.
I haven't experienced this yet.
I haven't had the icy feeling.
January time in the.
Oh yeah, so I started off probably the harder. You know, you can't start off any harder than learning in the Orkney Islands in March. You know, that is, you know, if you don't build up some kind of hardiness to diving there, and then of course I ended up in South Pacific in 24-degree water again. This is what diving is.
Did you go up at Scapa?
No, we did one recreational dive on Scapa, but no, it was all. So this was it was commercial scuba for our degree. So it was all learning the techniques of scuba. So it was all about search and recovery and doing transects, collecting data. So we didn't do any. So we met all the people who were doing the great dives in the Orkneys. Yeah. We never did it. We did one, and I think the viz wasn't great when we did it. So, but yeah, I haven't even got the kit anymore. I've got the UK dive kit. I think when I do build up my dive kit again, I will dip the toe back in the UK.
Yeah, that's a good place to start, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, just a little interval from this episode. Ian and I work hard to bring guests and content across our podcast platforms, social media, and our YouTube channel, The Big Scuba. Would you like to become involved? Become a supporter, a sponsor, a Patreon of The Big Scuba. There are several levels of contribution, the smallest being just $2. If you'd like to become a patron of The Big Scuba Podcast, please go to www.patreon.com/TheBiGScubaPodcast. There you will see the levels of support. You can be an octopus, a dolphin, an orca, or a mighty blue whale. Just for the $2, you'll receive a shout out on our next episode. We look forward to welcoming you to the Big Scuba podcast community. Right, back to the episode. So in terms of Project Aware, do you find people are actively coming to you to get more involved, or is it more a sort of you have to shout to get people involved?
So weirdly, despite our name, it's more about making divers aware of Project Aware. I think that's the thing that we tend to have to shout about is that we're doing this work. You know, we would like your help with it. I find that divers, and no matter who you train with, they're more naturally find an affinity to conservation than they do to learning to do extra components of diving. You know, it's when you must have seen this yourselves. You know, you get a diver in the water, they can't help themselves pick up any piece of rubbish that they see on the seabed. So it's almost hardwired into 99% of divers. So once they know the programs we do, you know, it's more or less of right. We need to kind of manage the expectation as opposed to, you know, please help us. But it's just about getting the word out about what Project Aware does and what we're doing, and we're about to start, you know, developing new areas of work. So it's this pandemic time has given us a little bit of reflection time to see what has worked really well, right? How can we take this to the next level when things start to open up again?
Did you find the Awareness Week worked well for you?
Yes. Yeah. It's worked really well. It's when you've got something that's coordinated globally, because it tends to get media coverage, and it's all about once you get media traction, you then get people going, well, what is this Aware Week? I'll look into it, and then you get people going, like, this sounds interesting, and yeah, and you know, and part of being a civil society organization, a key component is communication. So we need to be able to not just do, you know, great stuff on shark conservation or marine debris or any other components, but we need to be able to tell people what we're doing. But also we can't do it without the dive community. So the dive community know that if they go out and do a dive and collect, you know, one plastic bottle, it's actually part of a huge jigsaw piece of conservation. So the communications piece is huge for us.
Yeah, and obviously in your career, have you actively yourself noticed a big difference between, you know, jumping in the water when you first started to kind of what we're dealing with now?
Yes, I have. I've noticed it's a bit like sort of noticing the school kids who are more aware of climate change than they were when I was in school. And I've noticed that divers, and especially when I was in Fiji, we worked with a lot of dive operators up there too. We worked on protecting sort of small protected areas for things like manta rays and doing shark protections and doing marine debris cleanups. And you had much more engagement from divers from all over the world, lots from the UK, Australia, the US, all coming out actively looking to do dives that had a conservation focal point. They weren't just coming to learn to dive with the pretty corals and the lovely fish species. They genuinely wanted to come out and to have their dive mean something and be part of something. So that I've seen that change, not just since I was started, but over the past 5-10 years.
Yeah, that's good. And you mentioned sharks and rays. Is that something that you're particularly passionate about?
Yeah, I'm a kind of shark. I'm not going to call myself a biologist anymore. Yeah, I've got the mug, the Jaws mug in front of me, and I'm basically surrounded by shark. Yeah, there's sharks. So I'm going to say I started out as a shark biologist, but I'm now working conservation, and I was lucky enough back in 2013 to work for WWF to lead their global shark and ray conservation work. Sharks, it was Jaws was one of those big, huge things that did draw me into to study marine biology. And I know there's lots of anecdotal stories about I saw Jaws, I never want to dive again. And then the minute I get in the water, I hear the cello playing, and I want to get out. But for me, it was the completely opposite kind of effect. I sort of saw this film that made my jaw drop. I was like, I can't remember how old I was, probably too young to watch it under the under the guidelines. And plus I grew up to see, I saw sharks being caught, small dogfish and taupe being caught
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay, if you haven't, I'm glad you said yes, else I wouldn't have spoken to you if you hadn't seen Jaws. Yeah. I'm glad you double checked. I should have done my due diligence to find out, who'd done this. But yeah, the Jacques Cousteau programs were huge when I was younger. So they were on TV. Jaws just came out. I live in a fishing village, so the whole, all the planets aligned, and it kind of drew me into doing it.
Cousteau, he has inspired so many people. Yeah. So many people we've spoke to.
He's always mentioned.
Always mentioned. Inspired so many people.
And I remember when I was younger, his TV programs were on primetime TV. That he was almost the Attenborough of his day. That was kind of he'd almost cornered the kind of media aspect, and it was all focused on the underwater environment. So it was it wasn't like the kind of the David Attenborough program where it takes rainforests and oceans and everything. This was purely this alien world that nobody ever really saw before. And it was the closest that you would see to an astronaut, that was actually on and was achievable, to people. So that's probably what ticked all my boxes. And then I went to marine biology, studied seaweed and plankton and mud, and thought I don't remember Cousteau talking about all this stuff.
Have you got a favourite species of shark?
I do. It's probably one of the most boring. It's one of the most ubiquitous. If you ever dive in, kind of tropical, it's the black tip reef sharks. It looks like. Yep. I don't know if you've ever seen one. They're quite small.
Christine Sonato will be your friend forever.
I know Christine. Yeah, I know Christine.
But
they're everything. So they look like a classic shark. They've got beautiful kind of shape. If you don't have to dive, you can snorkel and you'll see them. Obviously, you need to be in the right kind of geographical locations, and they're quite friendly. I've seen them. In fact, when we moved to Fiji, my daughter was 2 at the time, or maybe just turned 3, and she was the first one of all of us to see a shark live, and it was a little blacktip reef shark that swam past her. And, yeah, so I just think they're and because
education, isn't it?
Oh, it is, and one of the things that I love is because they live in such the top couple of meters, when the sun is shining, you get the kind of the dappled rippling effect when they're swimming. Just wax lyrical of black-tip reef sharks.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Yeah, no, that's good. And it's things like that that are good to get people, involved in or hear about Project Aware as well, I guess, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's for the if you do dive in any kind of tropical region, it's huge. One of the most dived parts of the world. Divers will have seen black-tip reef sharks. But one of the things that kind of, when people say sharks, I often say a lot of the rays. So the sort of the little stingrays and the little or the little rays you get everywhere. People forget they're sharks too, and they get really overlooked in conservation. So of the and then I'm going to get this wrong because I don't have the figures in front of me, but of the 10 most endangered elasmobranchs, which is sharks and rays make up 7 of them. So rays are kind of more endangered than sharks. And when everyone talks about sharks, they always think of the classic, the fin and the teeth and the gills, but rays. So we work a lot on rays as well, and that's the thing where you use the shark as a gateway to say, well, this is a big issue, but also this is as big, if not an even bigger issue.
Do you work with like the other organisations as well, though? Like you've got Manta Pacific, and you have, because we had them on, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
We work with a lot. So basically, any organisation that works in conservation needs to work in coalition. Any organisation that tells you we've got the answer, we know what's happening, doesn't have the answer, because there's so many different issues, from climate change to marine debris to overfishing to all these.
They've got the tracking app, haven't they? Sort of
yeah, and we stay to Manta Pacific, and I don't think we've got a direct.
There's Manta Trust as well.
So Manta Trust, we work very closely with Manta Trust, and when, in fact, just to show how small and incestuous world the marine conservation world is. When I was in WWF, I led our work on a responsible shark and ray tourism guide. So WWF kind of wanted to develop this guide, but obviously WWF's it's not got huge links to the tourism industry. So we brought in Project Aware when I was in WWF, and the Manta Trust, because we had the shark expertise. So the 3 organizations, Manta Trust, WWF and Project Aware, developed a global best practice guide for operators anywhere, no matter where you are, if you've got shark kind of tourism. I then left WWF and joined Project Aware, so then I was kind of taking over the one component of the work that I'd already drafted, and Manta Trust had kind of developed it. So to really get any traction from a conservation perspective, you need to have these wide coalitions to really tackle all the issues.
Yeah, and it's a global thing as well, isn't it? So
completely.
You've got to be that accessible for
And like I say, the Manta Trust, they wouldn't have been able to do the shark components, because they have, but they got some of the world's leading experts on mantas. So taking that component into it, and with rays, often getting overlooked in conservation, it's important to get that component into the picture as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure some of our listeners will not realise the connection between sharks and rays.
There's Nick Dulvey, who is he's based in Canada. He actually went to University of East Anglia to study. Big, tall, gangly Northern Irish guy. He's co-chair of the IUCN, which is the global kind of scientific body. He's co-chair of their shark specialist group, and he always calls rays a little shark pancakes of wonder. He says people forget that they're actually sharks; they've just been squashed down. But yeah, so for those non-biologists, so you get fish, your fish that you see every day, well, not see every day, but fish people know about, the cod and your flatfish. They have bones in like we do, and obviously sharks and rays, they don't. They have cartilage like we have in your nose and your ear. So they're called elasmobranchs, and they both have that biological facet in similar a similar component.
Yeah, we saw huge cod, didn't we? It's an abs, didn't we?
Yeah.
Just underneath this rock, didn't we?
Yeah.
Just sitting there. Massive, great big cod.
You was diving at the time, were you?
Yeah, it was awesome. That was down at 12 meters.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Like
Yeah, so because the water was getting colder, they're starting to move in. Yeah.
How close did you get to that? That's because they're impressive beasts, aren't they?
I would say within a couple of meters.
Couple of meters,
yeah.
And I selfish for a living, so to see a living cod, it's just
That's what it looks like. And yeah.
It's really awesome. I've seen rays in the Med in the Red Sea. You know, beautiful to see. You know, really impressive.
The UK, the life around the UK is, compared to something like the Med, has been overfished.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's not a single species of shark that's not endangered. That, you know, you go to the Med and it's nice and warm and you see a few things, but around the UK, if you know, as long as you can bear the temperature and get close enough to see things, you know, there's some phenomenal life around the UK.
Yeah, it's awesome stuff.
And it's great, you know, as a new diver, to know that and not think, well, I've got to go to, you know, some tropical place.
No,
because we've got it here now, haven't we? And
and I remember, so I used to work once I sort of packed in the commercial diving, went back to college, and I worked for a marine survey firm, and we were doing work around Hastings on the south coast. There was an aggregate dredging license, so we were just monitoring the fisheries, a big Dover sole fishery there, and we were monitoring the fishery, pulling the nets. The fishermen were pulling the nets in to see that, you know, it's a very sustainable, clean fishery, you know, MSC certified. And as I was on the back of this small fishing board, I saw a bit of the seaweed, and it's kind of just moving slightly. And I asked the fisherman, what's up with that small bit of seaweed? And it was a seahorse. We found 2 or 3 little seahorses that were just caught in the nets. You know, and then the fishermen, the first thing they did was that they put some seaweed in the bucket, the seahorse in the bucket. They took them back to the Hastings Sea Life Centre, where they've got a seahorse breeding program, because you know, these are obviously species that I can't remember if they're endangered or vulnerable, but they're not very common. So, you know, it was just to be able to see this, you know, if you're diving down there, there's a chance you can see all these things. Yeah, it's great stuff.
Yeah, and obviously part of our podcast, we want to encourage non-divers, you know, for them to listen to us as well. But and you know, and in terms of Project Aware, you know, that's obviously important for you as well.
And divers can do the speciality, can't they? You know?
Yes, yeah. So, you know, a lot of the the Aware especially is a non-diving specialty. If you just want a introduction to basic marine conservation issues, you know, it's good for non-divers. But when we look at kind of seeing the journey of you know, if a diver goes out and collects a piece of debris or does something, how does that fit in the big scheme of things? Well, the only reason that we can get policy change or get conservation policy change is because we represent civil society. And even just getting supported, and that's people just even tweeting or liking what we do, non-divers, that gives us the validity to be in front of the policymakers to represent the whole kind of choir of conservationists. So you don't need to be a diver to be part of that journey. You know, even one diver collecting a piece of debris and one non-diver who sort of tweets the support at a minister, that's all part of the journey that kind of needs to happen for conservation to really change. Yeah,
that's a really important message as well. Yeah, because we don't want to be exclusive, you know, to divers.
Not at all. You see, and like, so divers are the ones who can kind of see some things, but the non-diving community, you know, if you don't dive, get out there and learn to do it and see what you can do.
You have to go to a dive centre to get that signed off.
It gets usually part of a dive centre that teaches a specialty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then you get the kind of Project Aware little certificate that states you've done that.
During the lockdown, seeing a lot of stuff on social media about, you know, do this dry course, as you know.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that we worked, especially, you know, as we got much stronger links to Paddy's than to BiGSac, but it's all about trying to help, because the tourism industry was hit from day one, you know, and it hit day one and hit hard from day one. When the minute that travel restrictions were brought in, and also the huge confusion, not that there's much clarity now, but the huge confusions of what you can do and couldn't do. Lots of dive operators all over the world were hit very hard. So one of the things that we were trying to immediately help from a coronavirus perspective is to get small operators say, look, there's actually dry courses that you can do that can drive some business towards you. You know, that okay, you're not going to get the diving component, but for us, it's really important because we need that broad church of people to get conservation done. So yeah, it's key for us, but also key to help the dive industry that's been really, really hit hard.
Oh yeah, it has. Yeah.
So what does the future hold for Project Aware?
The future is
kind of exciting and a little bit unknown. So unknown as to, we don't know the timelines when things are going to start, getting back to whatever the normal is going to be like. But it's given us time to.
You want to go back to normal?
Sorry?
You want to go back to normal?
No, so I wouldn't like to go back to normal as in, I've just been putting a sort of a few bits and pieces together about what's happened, and the UK, the world has missed all its sustainable development goals for 2020, all of them. Hasn't met one. You look at oil spills in Mauritius, you look at the amount of debris. So we collect debris, and the amount that's coming in is still eye-watering. So going back to just monitoring what's happening, no, I don't want to go back to that. We want to go back to really, really tackling and really coordinating the dive community, and regardless who you get trained with, or whether you're a diver, to really kind of tackle the big issues. So it's, when you say go back to normal, dive tourism really can drive conservation. So I'll give you an example from Fiji as to how dive tourism, a tangible example of improvement. So when I was based in Fiji, there was a economic analysis of the dive tour of shark and ray diving to the Fiji government and the Fiji economy. And in 2010, it was worth $42.2 million US. So that's just shark and ray diving, so not all diving. And this is Fiji is a tiny country of 800,000 people. It's a very small economy. That was a huge chunk of change.
Yeah.
And that was, if you go a diver, you come along, you stay with a hotel, you buy a few beers, buying meals, whatever. So that was the economic analysis. We worked with the Fijian government, said, if you don't protect these, this is the industry that you're going to lose or going to devalue. The minute the Attorney General saw that, and the minister was like, right, what can we do?
Okay.
Fiji then went to this regional meeting about fisheries across the whole South Pacific, and they drove through protections for sharks and rays across the entire South Pacific. That's an area bigger than the surface of the moon, and it's all because of the value of the tourism. Now, you want to be kind of very honest. Tourism is not going to solve conservation issues. You're never going to there's lots of arguments of what is a shark worth more alive than it is dead. Well, it all depends to whom. Is it more valuable to a diver or to a guy who wants to feed his community? But when you put it into an economic argument, that's when you really can add some leverage to stuff. So tourism can play a huge role, because divers and dive operators are economic stakeholders. You're not just talking about conservation for the sake of conservation, which is all very well and good, but the minute you put dollars or pounds or pence on something, that's when governments go, okay, hang on a second, you've got a point here.
And plus, everyone's got a camera and they can report back like sightings of these things. And
this is the thing that we want to really ramp up in 2021 and onwards. So we've got this global program of marine debris. We want to really supersize that, and we're going to develop new components for citizen science, and we want every dive to be a survey dive. So you've got people going around the world.
Science.
Yeah, you've got pretty much people going around the world with scientific recording equipment. Like say GoPros, cameras, dive computers. Your dive computer can monitor physical parameters. It's something that
temperature.
We work with
temperature.
Paralens, and one of the things with Paralens you can do is on their app, you can even put on their sightings of different species and that, because it automatically tells you the depth.
Yeah,
you can see all that in.
So basically, there's an army of people underwater all around the world, and they're the only ones who can actually get first-hand knowledge of what's happening, under the water around the world. And then what we want to do is then supersize that out to the non-diving community to say, right, okay, this is what's happening. Now we need to really shake the tree of the decision makers. And that's when it's just, you don't have to be a diver. You don't have to be 18 or 16 or meet minimum age requirements. If you are, capable of getting in touch with your decision maker. My daughter, she wrote a letter to her MP the other day about some issues. That's as valid as kind of taking it to the next level. It's the whole spectrum.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, and it's divers, non-divers again, isn't it? Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah, and need to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really exciting stuff.
It is, yeah, and you know, we have previously focused on say shark and ray conservation because they're some of the most endangered kind of marine species, marine debris because we've got a very successful program. We will be bringing in some new programs, new work areas. 2021 is really exciting. It's going to require sort of buy-in from the entire dive industry, but also from non-divers and kind of things like this podcast, just getting the word out and kind of raising this profile and raising this, you know, make people aware of aware. You know, that's one of the issues.
Who have now heard this, where are they best to go if they want to get involved?
Come to the Project Aware's website. If they want any information, you know, even contact information, you know, if they wanted to contact me, go to the Project Aware, projectaware.org, and all the information of what we do is on there. Also and contact details. There's even if they want to email us, there's an email info box which gets, you know, it's one of those things that actually gets to my email address. It's not one of the things that disappears into a black hole. As we're a very small organization, you know, we if we get lots of you know, sometimes it takes us a while to get through things, but we're a very personal organization. We're quite small. We're not. I work for, you know, when I work for large organizations where, you know, you've got thousands of employees and things get a bit messed, but we're a very sort of small org, and we tend to get back to people straight away.
That's good.
Yeah. And
in fact, you contacted us through the info box, I think it was. Yeah. So, you know, and as soon as we saw that, absolutely, yeah, we get back in touch with you, and here we are.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Should we start?
Yeah. So we all our guests, we ask a few questions. And just build up a bank of different answers because everybody's so different.
Yeah.
So first one is, what dive location is on your wish list or bucket list?
Dive location on my wish list. I've got to say, now that you remind me, Scapa Flow is on my wish list because I actually I want to go back to somewhere that I dived that was a great location that I didn't actually dive from a recreational perspective. I've never dived the Great Barrier Reef. So if I looked at the kind of two different complete areas of the world, one where I've been to but haven't actually enjoyed from a recreational perspective, and one that, you know, is one of the bucket list areas. So yeah, those two.
Yeah.
And I think we would normally ask, what is your favourite marine animal and why? Well, obviously we know that. Do you have a UK-based one?
I do. Well, I do and I don't. I've got one that's kind of based.
It's kind of escaped you.
So I have a huge soft spot for sea cucumbers.
Yeah.
I think they are absolutely essential. They're beautiful. You see them. You don't have to be. I'm not a particularly good scuba diver because all my diving was on surface supply and heavily weighted. So I'm an actor. So but you don't have to be very good scuba diver to see these things. And what people think that, you know, sharks and rays, they're the best thing. That they get a lot of attention. They get a lot of conservation effort. And a couple of years ago, there was sea cucumbers are under as much pressure, if not more, because they're a seafood commodity. Yeah. They're very easy to catch. You can pick up hundreds of them. So they're being decimated around the world, and they don't get the attention because they're not particularly, you know, most of them are not particularly nice looking.
On a poster.
Yeah, they're not going to make a blockbuster film of a sea cucumber, I don't think.
Knows the attack of the
the attack of the sea cucumber. But then when I kind of started to look into them, you know, they basically they poo out sand. You know, they're kind of a bit like the parrotfish, where you go on a sandy beach in the tropics. You know, you're basically standing on fish and sea cucumber poo. But also their poo raises the pH of where they are, so they can actually combat climate change by eating. So they're kind of not necessarily beloved creatures. And we started a Project Aware, a campaign called Love the Unloved, where it's very easy to love sharks or whales or dolphins but you've got all these other things that people kind of ignore, and they're just as critically important. And so you get them around the UK, but you get them all over the world. So I would say sea cucumbers, maybe even.
Yeah, that's good.
Don't tell my boss.
Okay, no, that's fab. If you could take up to 3 people, scuba diving, snorkeling, who would you take? They can be past, present.
I would take some global decision makers. So whoever may or may not be in power in the immediate future. So the US has a huge role to play on global conservation. So I would take, you know, I would take the next president of the United States just to show what is down there. And
would you take the present one then?
I will take the next president of the United States. Who else? 3 people. Okay, who else would I take?
You don't have to take 3. It's up to 3 people. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would take. Why would I do that? So I was in a conservation meeting a couple of years ago, and there was in fact, it was the Manta Trust that did this. They developed a virtual dive with devil rays, and you had governments who were, from African countries and from landlocked countries who'd never experienced they didn't have a coastline for a start.
Yeah.
And they saw these things. It's as close as I've been to diving without actually getting wet. And they supported protections for these creatures because they saw it. So for me, it's the decision makers. I would.
Yeah.
It's true. I think it's a really good idea. Because then they can see it for themselves, can't they?
Yeah, firsthand. That's
absolutely
the thing. Yeah.
Because you do get people in charge, and they don't believe the scientists. They're like, "No, that's not right."
They've got Scooby.
Yeah, and that's right. And
you see it for yourself.
Yeah, and you can describe something about, it's like being Welsh and talking rugby to someone who doesn't care about rugby. It doesn't click, and I don't understand. But okay, but it's part of your culture and your heritage. But when you experience it, you go, right, now I get it. Okay, that's the kind of thing that I crowbar in Welsh and in rugby there for.
So what's your favourite piece of dive equipment? What's the bit you can't do without?
Piece of dive equipment I can't do without.
Yeah.
Bar regulator. Piece. It's the mask that I've got. So my mask. The bulk of my diving when I was commercial diving was in a Kirby Morgan hat.
Hard hat.
So, in the helmet. So your head's always dry and you can talk. And when I going back to scuba diving, I was like, oh my god, I can't talk, and this thing's flooding with water. And where's all the valves? So I finally found a mask that didn't leak with my weird shaped face, and also if I didn't particularly shave it, kind of didn't leak as well. So my mask is my piece of kit and people spit into masks. So
they do. What mask have you got?
It is a Cressy. Where is it? Somewhere around here. It's a rotten one that needs a new seal.
You put your hand on your mask. Mine's all stored away in the box somewhere.
Yeah.
So what would be your post-dive meal?
Post-dive meal.
A curry or?
Post-dive meal. I do like a beer, and yes, there used to be a great in Fiji, a great curry. They did a coconut vegetable curry, something nice stodgy, something ricey, and a cold bottle of beer. That is my post-dive. That's my post-dive.
Vegetarian?
Yes. Yeah, I've been vegetarian for all my life. It was relatively recent. My wife and daughter are vegetarians. Not that they kind of put ultimatums on me, but living in Fiji, the meat was terrible. A lot of meat was imported, and also you don't have the best power supply. So that a piece of meat would potentially come from New Zealand, defrosted on the way, refrosted, sat in a port, defrosted, refrosted. So it was quite easy to give up the meat. And then the fish out there was beyond superb, anything I've ever had. But just working in the kind of with the marine plastics issue and working with some scientists in Australia, we've done some analysis. That's scared me a little bit of that. So yeah, I just took it's also easier when your family are vegetarians. Yeah. But for me,
you don't eat fish?
No. But I still crave meat and crave fish. But I've just kind of had that. I know and also it's it's easier when my family are vegetarians. I then have to make my own meals, sort of that meal. But
that's very true.
Yeah, but stodgy, a nice stodgy, ricey curry that's got Yeah.
Cool. So last question.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got if we give you a banner, a placard, and you've put a message on there to the millions of people. Yeah. What are you going to put on there?
What am I going to put on there?
Can be a symbol, can be an image, can be a statement.
Yeah.
Whatever you want.
Get involved. That would be it. Get involved. Without people getting involved at any level, nothing is going to change.
Right.
And that is, that get involved. If you're a diver, get involved in
a conservation program. It doesn't even have to be a project aware conservation program. You know, ideally we'd love it to be a project aware one, but find out what's happening. If you're going diving somewhere, or you've got local dive, find out what they're doing. If they're not doing anything, ask them if there's anything they can be doing.
Yeah.
If you're not a diver and you know of issues, get involved, get in touch with your decision makers, and that's no matter where you are in the world. So that get involved, that I would have that in every language to every audience member. Without the getting involved, nothing will change.
Jill Hyneth said to us on that question, is volunteer, and I think that works really well.
Absolutely.
That you
Absolutely.
Yourself, people like all saying, get involved, do these things.
Yep, absolutely. And you can be involved from everything to actively taking part to getting the people who need to make the decisions to take notice of that was getting part. So it's in the whole spectrum. So
and, you know, the size isn't just getting involved, and just it makes any effort is no effort.
And for us to get change scale, once you've got the kind of, you know, the maths of scale, that's when things start to change.
No, excellent answers, thank you very much.
Cool. Do you have any questions for us?
How did you start the podcast? It's kind of it's a very focused podcast. How did it kind of come about? And from
I was on a previous one, and that when we started, we thought, right, we'll change this one and we'll make one where we encourage girls and new divers to get involved really and pick up the skills of becoming a diver. And we wanted to, because I've got children, you know, and thinking about them as well, how can we do something to highlight all these great things that a lot of these divers that we're talking to are doing, and kind of network and then shout about what people are doing.
And it is more generalized, so we don't want to be specifically like down the technical route. It's got to be, you know, catch a global, you know, audience and touch on all different subjects that you know are effectively us conserving our oceans and rivers.
Brilliant.
So a hand in both parts, so scuba diving and also marine conservation. That's why we're outreach partners for the reef world. Because, you know, we help share their message as well. And we recently done a river clean in Norwich with a green bike. And we use some of the ethics and the reef world's worksheets as a basis of doing
what we do.
Litter picking and things like that.
So as I've got that, and my turn. I've got the mic. So where's your favourite place to dive, and again, where would you love to dive?
Do you want to answer that too?
Well, I only qualified in July, so
you still have a favourite place.
So, I mean, obviously, diving in St Abbs was amazing because that was the first ocean dive. So I'd love to see more of the UK coastline because we hear so many people shouting about the UK. So
Weybourne, you enjoyed that?
Oh yeah, Weybourne did a wreck. Yeah, that was
nice.
The day after I qualified.
So you were properly into the deep end then.
Yeah, it wasn't. You know, it's only 5 meters, 5-6 meters.
Yeah, but still,
You know, that immediately going from Gildenberg Lake, where you could see very little, it's horrendous, and then going to look at a wreck with all these pretty, you know, life on it, lots of crabs, and you think, wow, and it is. It does feel like another world you're just like now seeing, and
that's why you learn to dive. These things.
Yeah, and talking to all the amazing people we have had on the podcast, that was kind of, you know, just made it even more special as well.
Because some of the people we spoke to, they just leave you awe-inspired, don't they? You know, because you just think, wow, you know, we mentioned Jill Hyneth. You know, she's dived in an iceberg. John Chatterton dived down. You know, he's been down to the Titanic, and
wow,
all these people. You just think, wow, this is just awesome. Mike, you know, we spoke to Mike, the NASA astronaut, and he was telling us about how him being a PADI open water diver helped him get through the NASA astronaut
training and do like the space book.
How he got
so
brilliant.
But equally, it's not all the big names. We've spoken to like a youngster in Ireland, and he was just so passionate about his diving experience and the life that he was seeing there.
What's the name of the dive centre? up in the Midlands.
Yeah, and another young girl who's recently qualified, but her passion for, she's not been abroad or anywhere.
Yeah.
But it was just
Ilkeston
and Kimberley.
Yeah.
So
It's great. I went to my daughter's school because they're doing oceans as part of their topic this year. So I went in to give a little chat about them. I thought, everyone loves sharks. Took lots of kind of videos of sharks and octopus changing color. And one of the so I also thought maybe I'd better get some facts and kind of use Dr. Google to get some facts. And one of them, which I'd completely forgotten about, is there's more artifacts in the world's oceans than there are in the world's museums. I just sort of threw that in, and they were all like, just blown. And then you realise how little we actually know about about just off the coast.
I think the astronaut we spoke to, we know more about the moon and Mars than we do about our ocean.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, it's mind blowing, really.
Yeah, you definitely learn. Sometimes I'm sitting through spreadsheets and policy documents, then realise actually there's still so much more to know. So it kind of drives you on. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Cheers, pleasure. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.